profile on President Theodore Roosevelt. This is kind of an interesting profile. He was an interesting character. Well, Theodore Roosevelt was born in New York City on October 27th of 1858. Theodore Roosevelt was born in New York City on October 27th of 1858. He's going to be the first president we've talked about that's going to avoid what?
Being born in Ohio.
Well, close. But what's he also going to avoid that all the other ones took part in? The Civil War, because he's going to be born too late. Okay? So he's born in New York City on October 27th of 1858, and he's the second of 4 children born to Theodore and Margaret Roosevelt. So what is he? He's a junior, okay? So Theodore Roosevelt was born in New York City on October 27th, 1858. He was the second of 4 children born to Theodore and Martha Roosevelt. Now his father was a glass importer. He imported fine glasswares and sold them. So do you think they would be a poor family or a well-to-do family? Well-to-do, very good. He comes from a very well-to-do family. Money was not an issue for the Roosevelts. His father was a glass importer, and the family was considered at the time to be well-to-do, had plenty of money. Now, when he was growing up in his, what we call early years, Theodore Roosevelt, this is his son, was known for his great energy, his great curiosity, his great determination, but he was kind of a sickly child. He had asthma, and he was very nearsighted, and so he wore glasses at a very young age and was often teased for those. I can relate to that because I got glasses when I was 5. And you go to school, and at 5 years old, you're like the one person that has glasses, and they don't see that as a good thing. They see that as an odd thing. So they say things like 4 eyes and blind as a bad, whatever. But I can kind of remember that. So I get what happened to him. So again, during his early years, he was known for his great energy. He was known for his curiosity. He was known for his determination. But he suffered badly from asthma and was very, very nearsighted, which means he wore glasses at a very young age. And he was often, I guess for lack of a better term, bullied growing up. And that became especially noticeable when he was 13 years old. 2 boys tormented him. We call it bullying today. And he came home and told his father, and he was very upset because he just couldn't stick up for himself. Not strong enough to fight back, and it really upset him. So back in today's days, what would happen what would happen today if a kid 13 years old in the junior high came home and told his parents he had been bullied? What would happen? Oh God, the parents would be up at the school and giving you the business, and it'd just be brutal, okay, if you're the administrator. Well, that wasn't what the story was back in these days. You know what Theodore Roosevelt's dad did after he came home and reported he'd been bullied and was so embarrassed that he couldn't fight back? He built him his own gymnasium in the house. Now, this isn't a gymnasium like you think of where you're shooting hoops. The definition of gymnasium in those days was a place you would lift weights and jump ropes and run and do agility things. And so Theodore Roosevelt's father decided he had seen enough of his son being bullied, so his position wasn't to go complain to the school. His position was to build him a gym and have him, work hard and overcome these physical problems that he had. And he did. He worked like crazy, and his asthma went away, and he developed this unusual physical strength. Do you know that when he was an adult, Theodore Roosevelt was 5 foot 9 inches tall and weighed 220 pounds. Now, I'm 225, 230, and I'm 6'1". This guy's 5'9", and he wasn't fat. He was solid. Okay? So, again, when he was 13 years old, Roosevelt was tormented by 2 boys at school. He felt ashamed because he was not strong enough to fight back. He told his father built a gymnasium in the family home, and he worked very hard and not only overcame his asthma, but he also built up an unusual physical strength. As an adult, he was 5'9", 220. Well, he finishes his elementary and high school years, and he enters Harvard University in 1876 at the age of 18. Okay? So he finishes his schooling in New York City. He then enrolls at Harvard University in 1876 at the age of 18. Well, during his third year in college at Harvard, before he graduated, what did he do, Regan? Take a look at your ID sheet. Tell me what you think he did. He met a girl. What was her name? Alice Lee. And she was the daughter of a very wealthy Bostonian who owned his own investment firm. So he married into money, and he had money, so it's going to be a pretty wealthy family. Okay? So in his third year of college at Harvard, he meets Alice Lee, who is the daughter of a wealthy Bostonian who owned his own investment firm. And 1 year later, on Theodore Roosevelt's 22nd birthday, they get married. Okay? On his birthday. Yep, so a year after they meet, on his birthday, 22nd birthday, they get married. So he marries while he's in college prior to graduation. Well, he graduates from Harvard, and he really doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. He thinks he wants to be a lawyer, so he enrolls at Columbia University Law School, but the subjects don't interest him, and he drops out. Okay? So he really's not sure what he's going to do with his life after his graduation from Harvard. He thinks he might want to be a lawyer, so he enrolls at Columbia University Law School. Courses don't interest him, and so he drops out. Well, he decided after he dropped out he's going to join the Republican Party and run for the New York State Legislature. So after he drops out of Columbia University Law School, he joins the Republican Party, and he decides he's going to run for the New York State Legislature. Mike Greer, you know who Mike Greer is? From Orland? He's in the Wyoming State Legislature, so it'd be that type of position. And he wins the position, and everything's going really well for he and his wife until February 14th of 1884. So he joins the Republican Party. He wins this election as a New York State legislator. Everything's going really well for him and his wife until February 14th of 1884. What day is that, girls? Valentine's Day. He faces a double tragedy in his life on that exact day. Anybody guess what one of his issues might have been, one of the tragedies he faced? Anybody want to guess what happened? His wife died 2 days after giving birth to an infant daughter, and she died of kidney failure. So he loses his wife on the 14th of February, 1884, just 2 days after she had given birth to a little girl. What else? What other tragedy did he face that day? No, baby didn't die. Somebody might have said over here. What'd you say over here? Did you guys say the baby died? Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Who else might have died that would have been a tragedy for him? His mother. His mother dies of typhoid fever. They both die in the same house, hours apart. That'd be a tough day for you, wouldn't it? Lose your wife, who had given birth to a daughter 2 days before, a kidney failure, then within hours in the same house you lose your mother of typhoid fever. Now kids, it was a lot different in those days. Who took care of children back in these days? Exclusively the moms. Well, he doesn't have his wife anymore, and then maybe his mother would step in. She's dead too. And I don't know the relationship of the other side of the family, but he left little Alice, his daughter, named after his mother, with his sister. And he went west. He was just in depression. He left the east and went west to the western frontier. So after the death of his mother and his wife, he gives his sister responsibility to take care of his infant daughter, two-day-old daughter, and decides he's going west to the western frontier. You know what he does out there? He goes to the Dakota Territory, because they're not states yet, and he runs 2 cattle ranches in the Dakota Territory. So he goes west, leaves his daughter with his sister, and runs 2 different cattle ranches in the Dakota Territory. Well, during his time in the American West running those ranches, he becomes an avid writer, and he writes 2 books during his time out west. I happen to have first edition, first printings of both. The first book was simply a biography on Missouri Senator Thomas Hart Benton. Have we not talked about him before? Does that ring a bell? Thomas Hart Benton? If anybody? No? Nobody remembers that name? Remember, he was one of the new guard that came in, one of the new politicians with Henry Clay and Daniel Webster and John C. Calhoun. So he writes a biography of Senator Thomas Hart Benton of Missouri. He also then writes a 4-volume series entitled The Winning of the West. The Winning of the West. So he writes 2 books. Biography of Thomas Hart Benton of Missouri, Senator. He also writes a book entitled The Winning of the West. I'll show you one of the volumes. Would you like to see volume 1? Be a little careful, these are first edition, first printings. Now, on December 2nd of 1886, after having his full of the American West, Roosevelt remarries a lady by the name of Edith Carroll, who was a childhood friend. So on December 2nd of 1886, Theodore Roosevelt remarries Edith Carroll, a childhood friend. You know, I've always told my wife, if something happens to me before her, I want her to mourn like crazy for about 15 minutes and then get on with your life, man. Go find another guy or don't, you know, that type of thing. So remarriage is probably a good thing for people. And he remarried in 1886, a little over 2 years after he lost his wife, to Edith Carroll, who was a childhood friend. They actually had 5 children together and raised Alice as well. So they raised 6 kids, 5 between the 2 of them, and then Roosevelt's daughter that he had when just before his wife died. Well, what do you think he did after he got back from the West and got remarried? What did he go into again? Politics. And he runs for mayor of New York City, but loses. He runs for mayor of New York City, but loses. And he's a little disappointed, but remember President Benjamin Harrison? He appointed Roosevelt in 1888 to the Civil Service Commission. So even though he loses his bid to become mayor of New York, he does get a political position in President Benjamin Harrison's cabinet, as Roosevelt was appointed to the Civil Service Commission by a Republican president, right? Benjamin Harrison. What party is Roosevelt part of? Republican, okay? So in 1888, Theodore Roosevelt was appointed to the Civil Service Commission by President Harrison. Well, what usually happens when a Democratic president like Grover Cleveland gets elected? Usually they put people in there of their own political party. Well, they thought enough of Theodore Roosevelt, at least Cleveland did, that he reappointed him to the Civil Service Commission, where Roosevelt served until 1895. So that's kind of saying something. When you're a Republican and a Democratic president reappoints you to a position, usually you'd think they would give that to people within maybe their own party. So he had done a good enough job that Democratic President Grover Cleveland reappointed him, and he served in the Civil Service Commission until 1895. In 1895, he accepted a position entitled the Board of Police Commissioners in New York City. He accepted the position of Board of Police Commissioners in New York City. Does anybody want to guess what you'd do if you were the Board of Police Commissioners in New York City? What would you do? What would you oversee if you were a police commissioner? The police. What does the school board here oversee? The schools, right? Well, he would oversee the police, and the reason they brought him in is because there was rumored corruption and dishonesty among police officers in New York City. And they brought Theodore Roosevelt in to clean that up, okay? There was rumors and innuendos that these police officers were dirty, that they weren't very honest. And Roosevelt spent most of his time on the board of police commissioners stamping out this corruption in the New York City Police Department. That's what he did. Well, in 1896, when William McKinley was running for president, guess who campaigned and spoke on McKinley's behalf every chance he had? Theodore Roosevelt. And what did Theodore Roosevelt gain by doing that? Now, I want you to think about this as the other class picked it up. What did Roosevelt get for campaigning and supporting William McKinley so much in the election of 1896 in which McKinley was elected? What did he get in return for that? Come on.
Assistant Secretary.
That a girl. He was appointed Assistant Secretary of the Navy. And, you know, the rest is history as far as getting the Philippine Islands and all that kind of business. So after campaigning vigorously and supporting William McKinley in his election campaign in 1896, when McKinley was elected, Roosevelt was rewarded by the new president, who named him Assistant Secretary of the Navy. And we know then that he was a vice presidential candidate in 1900, and we know that he succeeded to the presidency, right? And McKinley was killed by Leon Czolgosz. Well, I will tell you this, because we're not going to go into these elections specifically, but after serving William McKinley's term, he ran for his own term in 1904 and was elected. So he not only is going to serve the rest of McKinley's, he's also going to have his own term in 1904. Okay? Now, we're going to cut away from politics a little bit and tell you 4 notable things that happened during his presidency. And what I mean by his presidency is during the time that he served his own term as president, not during the term of William McKinley. Okay? The first thing that happened of significance was something called the Panama Canal. You know what that is there, Tatum? What's the Panama Canal? Other than a canal through Panama. What was the significance of the Panama Canal? See, this is why I really worry about your world history instruction. Yes?
It's the canal that went through Panama, so the ships didn't have to go all the way around.
Very good. Before this, ships wanted to go from the Atlantic to the Pacific. They had to go all the way around South America and up into the Pacific. The Panama Canal was a canal that was cut through the country of Panama that allowed you just to go right straight through there easily, okay? Now there's a history behind that, because how did we ever get the Panama Canal? That has nothing to do with us, does it really? Well, what happened when Roosevelt was elected to his own term, the countries of Panama and Colombia were revolting against each other. They were in kind of a war. Well, guess who Roosevelt supported in this war? Panama. Why would he support Panama? Because he knew they would allow him to put this canal through if he supported that country. So he sent battleships to that area and supported Panama, and Panama wins this war against Colombia, and Roosevelt says, well, for helping you out there, how about if we build a canal through your country to attach the Atlantic and Pacific? We'll pay for the whole thing. We won't, charge you a bit, and you'll probably gain financially from it as well, which they would. You think those ships that stop there don't pay a toll, or their people spend money there, whatever. So Roosevelt's thrilled to death, and so when that revolt ends and Panama prevails in the conflict with Colombia, they begin construction on the Panama Canal. Now this is 2 things that never happen in construction, Kate. It's never on time, and it's never at budget, ever. Now if you look at the new Bighorn Federal Savings building they're building, do you think that thing's on time? No, and you're probably not on budget. I built a house. They are never on time or on budget. Oh, well, it's going to cost a little more for this, or oh, you want this type of countertop? Okay. So the thing about the Panama Canal that was amazing is it was built on time and on budget. which is crazy. Anybody know what it cost to build the Panama Canal back in 1905, 6-ish, 7-ish? Anybody want to guess what it cost to build that? Cut a little hole through Panama? $360 million. Today, I don't know what that would be, but it would be billions, okay? $360 million, probably worth every single penny, really, when you think about what it does, right? Now, important note to note, so to speak, is when President Roosevelt was interviewed after his presidency, he said of all the things that he accomplished during his presidency, that this was the most important to him. He felt that it was his greatest accomplishment as president was getting the Panama Canal built. Although he wasn't in office when it was completed because it took some time, but he gets credit for it. So when it was dedicated, he was out of office by then, okay? But he was the man instrumental in getting it done. So the Panama Canal officially opened up after Roosevelt left the presidency, but he cited it as his greatest accomplishment as president, okay? So there's the first thing that happened. The second thing that really boomed during his presidency were national parks. He was really into wildlife conservation. Okay? Now, was Yellowstone Park already a park when he was president? Yeah, it's like 1876, I think, or 1879. But the point to make is during the Roosevelt presidency, the number of national parks in the United States more than doubled while he was president. He was really into national parks. So half of the national parks that we have in this country are because Theodore Roosevelt thought it was important to have national parks. Now, probably what got him going, anybody here have any ties to Florida? Anybody?